soft chime of the restaurant door pulled Marcus Vance from his thoughts, and in that instant, the axis of his world tilted. He had been seated at the corner table for precisely 10 minutes, the condensation on his water glass tracing paths his nervous fingers had made. He'd already drained half of it and had readjusted the knot of his charcoal gray tie at least 3 times. The words his daughter, Zoe, had spoken just an hour ago were still a vivid echo in his mind. "Dad, you're allowed to be happy again. Mom would want you to be." His 16-year-old had all but shoved him out of their West Philly row house, straightening his collar and reminding him that his colleague Brenda had insisted this woman was something special, a titan in the business world who, improbably, shared his appreciation for long-form historical documentaries. The ambiance of Il Polpo, a warmly lit haven just off Rittenhouse Square, wrapped around him. The low hum of contented conversations, the subtle clinking of silverware, and the rich, layered scents of garlic, wine, and roasting herbs should have been soothing. But all of it dissolved into background noise the moment she appeared. Eleanor Croft entered not with a step, but with a smooth, confident glide. She navigated the threshold in a wheelchair, a piece of modern engineering so sleek and minimalist it looked like it belonged in a design museum. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs in a silent rush. She was, without question, stunning. Her dark hair was swept up into a sophisticated twist that exposed the elegant line of her neck, and her high cheekbones caught the golden light of the chandeliers. She wore a sapphire blue dress with a simple, clean cut that spoke of a quiet expense far exceeding his monthly salary as a history teacher. Yet it wasn't her beauty or the obvious markers of her wealth that caused a familiar tightening in his chest. It was the way she paused just inside the doorway, her sharp, intelligent eyes performing a rapid, almost imperceptible scan of the restaurant's layout. She was calculating routes, noting obstacles, and mapping pathways with a practiced efficiency that was achingly familiar. Marcus knew that scan. He had watched someone else, the love of his life, perform those same mental calculations 1,000 times over. A young hostess approached Eleanor, her smile a little too bright, her posture radiating awkwardness. "Good evening, ma'am. We can certainly seat you, but I should mention there's a small step up to the main dining area." "The step's too high," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. He had materialized beside them so quietly that Eleanor started, her professional composure flickering for a fraction of a second. "But there's a ramped entrance through the patio on the side. I saw it when I came in." Eleanor looked up at him, her gaze sharp and assessing. The mask of polite distance slipped, revealing a flicker of genuine surprise. "You must be Marcus." "I am," he said, a warm, genuine smile reaching his eyes. He saw something shift in hers, a brief spark of curiosity. "May I show you the way?" "Lead on," she replied, her voice a low, pleasant alto. As they settled at the table he had chosen for its quiet corner location and ample space, Eleanor studied him with the intense focus of a person accustomed to reading others in an instant. "Most people do one of 2 things," she stated, her tone neutral. "They either stare or they make a very deliberate show of not noticing at all." "You did neither." Marcus placed his menu on the table, meeting her direct gaze without flinching. "Would you have preferred that I pretend not to notice?" "No," she admitted, caught slightly off guard by his straightforwardness. She paused, recalibrating. "It's just not the usual response. The men I've met on first dates typically either act as if my chair is an invisible elephant in the room or treat it like the single most defining thing about me." "And which of those would be your preference?" he asked, a hint of playful curiosity in his tone. She laughed. It was a real, uninhibited sound that completely transformed her face, softening the sharp lines of her focus into something bright and engaging. "Neither, as a matter of fact. I'd prefer they just see it as a component of who I am. Like the color of your eyes or the way you laugh," Marcus said, the words simple and unadorned. Something in Eleanor's expression changed then. It was like watching a hairline fracture appear in a carefully constructed wall. "Exactly like that," she said, her voice softer now. The waiter arrived, a consummate professional who treated them both with easy respect. As they ordered, Marcus found himself observing the way Eleanor managed the interaction. She possessed a quiet authority, asking about ingredients with the precision of someone who understood food and recommending a wine pairing with the casual expertise of a person who frequented establishments far more exclusive than this one. Once the waiter had departed, Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her blue dress a slash of vibrant color in the dim light. "Brenda tells me you're a high school history teacher. That must be a challenge." Marcus smiled, appreciating the diplomatic phrasing. "Teenagers are essentially talking bundles of chaotic emotion and questionable judgment," he said. "But they're also brutally honest. They'll give you their unvarnished opinion on your lesson plan, your tie, and your life choices, often in the same breath." "Sounds terrifying," she said with a wry grin. "It has a way of keeping you humble," he admitted, taking a sip of the wine she had selected. "It was excellent. Brenda mentioned you work in the tech sector, but she was conspicuously vague about the specifics." A playful glint appeared in Eleanor's eyes. "Croft Innovations. I'm the CEO." Marcus nearly choked on his wine. He set the glass down carefully. "Croft Innovations. As in the company that's been all over the news for revolutionizing medical data security?" "Guilty as charged," she confirmed, clearly enjoying his reaction. "Wow," he breathed, shaking his head in disbelief. "My daughter, Zoe, is going to lose her mind when I tell her about this. She's passionate about coding, and I'm almost certain I remember her talking about your company's work on cybersecurity for hospital systems." He looked at her with newfound awe. "She follows industry leaders like some kids follow pop stars. She reads business journals for fun. She'll probably want to prepare a full list of questions about your career trajectory." "A smart kid," Eleanor commented, a genuine smile playing on her lips. 16 going on 40, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and exasperation. "She's been the adult in our house for a while now." Eleanor registered the subtle shift in his tone, the shadow that briefly crossed his features, but she didn't press. Instead, she leaned in, her interest clearly piqued. "Tell me about her." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus's entire demeanor lit up. He spoke about Zoe with an unguarded joy that was captivating to watch. He shared stories of her razor-sharp wit, her fierce determination to conquer advanced calculus, and her endearing habit of leaving motivational sticky notes on his bathroom mirror before big tests. Eleanor found herself completely engrossed, not just by the depth of his love for his daughter, but by the gentle wisdom with which he spoke of the trials of parenting. He respected Zoe's growing independence, celebrated her intelligence, and was unabashedly proud of her resilience. "She sounds remarkable," Eleanor said honestly as their appetizers arrived. "She is," Marcus affirmed, his expression turning more thoughtful. "She's had to be. Kids have this incredible ability to adapt when life throws the unthinkable at them." Something in the weight of his words made Eleanor put down her fork. "When life demands it of them," she repeated softly, turning his phrase back to him as a gentle question. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as if he were weighing what to say next. "Zoe lost her mother 4 years ago," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "She had to grow up a lot faster than any child should." "Oh, Marcus." "I'm so sorry," Eleanor said, the words heartfelt and immediate. "Thank you." He met her eyes, his own clear and direct. It was a long illness. We had 3 years of watching someone you love fight a war you know they can't win. Zoe was a rock through the entire thing, stronger than I was, if I'm being honest." Eleanor felt an unexpected clenching in her chest, a wave of empathy that was sharp and profound. "What was her name?" Simone, Marcus said, and his smile was a fragile, beautiful thing, tinged with the ghost of an old, deep grief. I think she would have liked you. She always said you could learn everything you needed to know about a person by how they treated the waitstaff and whether they looked you in the eye when they spoke. 2 tests I apparently passed, Eleanor murmured. With flying colors, he confirmed. They ate in a comfortable silence for a few moments, the unspoken understanding hanging in the air between them. It was Eleanor who spoke first. May I ask what happened? You don't have to answer if it's too painful. Marcus considered her question, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. Simone had a rare autoimmune disease. It began with joint pain, crushing fatigue. We wrote it off as stress from her job. She was a nurse practitioner, but it progressed with a terrifying speed. Within a year, she needed mobility aids. Within 2, she was using a wheelchair full-time. Eleanor's breath hitched. The casual way he'd mentioned the wheelchair, his immediate, intuitive understanding of her needs at the restaurant's entrance. It all snapped into focus. The ramp, the lack of awkwardness, the directness. That's why you knew about the ramp, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Among other things, he replied gently. I learned to see the world through a different lens during those years. To notice the small details that become monumental obstacles. The height of a curb, the width of a doorway, the accessibility of a public restroom. I learned that most of the barriers people face aren't even physical. They're built from the reactions of others. Eleanor stared at him, the pieces of the puzzle that was Marcus Vance clicking into place. Most people don't get that kind of education. No, they don't, he agreed, a flicker of old pain in his eyes. And to be perfectly honest, it's an education I wish with all my heart I'd never needed. But since I did, well, it changed me. It changed how I see the world and how I see people. The weight of a shared, unspoken understanding settled between them. This wasn't the pity she so often encountered, nor was it the clawing search for an inspirational tale. This was something far rarer. Recognition from someone who had walked a parallel path, who had navigated the same unseen landscapes of care and adaptation. I was 28 when it happened to me, she heard herself say, the words coming out before she had consciously decided to speak them. I was a competitive equestrian. Had been since I was a girl. I was training for the Olympic trials. She paused, the memory still sharp after all these years. The horse spooked during a cross-country event, threw me into a stone wall. I shattered 3 vertebrae. He listened, his expression unwavering, his attention absolute. There was none of the awkward, head-tilted sympathy face she had come to expect and despise. The doctors were very clinical, she continued. They called it a complete spinal cord injury, T12 to L1. No sensation or voluntary movement below the point of injury. They explained it to me with the same detachment they might use to describe a malfunctioning appliance. How long was your recovery? He asked, his voice gentle. 6 months in hospitals and rehabilitation facilities. But the real recovery, the process of figuring out who I was going to be after that took years. Eleanor traced the rim of her wine glass with a fingertip, her gaze focused on the movement. I built Croft Innovations from my hospital bed. It started as consulting work on a laptop just to keep my mind busy. Then it grew, partly because I needed the income, but mostly because I had this desperate need to prove that my mind was still sharp, even if my legs weren't working anymore. Proving it to yourself or to other people? Marcus asked perceptively. Eleanor considered this. Both, she admitted. I think the business world already saw me as an anomaly. A woman in tech was unusual enough back then. A woman in a wheelchair. I became a narrative. I was either an inspiration story or a liability concern. I was never just a CEO. That must be exhausting. It is, she confirmed, though I've learned to use their underestimation as a weapon. They expect me to be fragile or grateful or inspiring. Instead, I'm ruthless." A sharp, brilliant grin flashed across her face. "It's remarkably effective in negotiations." Marcus laughed, a deep, warm sound that made her smile in response. "Remind me never to negotiate a used car purchase with you." "Smart man," she quipped. As their main courses arrived, the conversation drifted into lighter, easier territory. They talked about Zoe's aspirations for college, Eleanor's latest ventures into renewable energy tech, and their shared love for documentaries about the Roman Empire. But beneath the comfortable banter, something more profound was taking shape. A foundation of mutual respect and understanding was being laid, brick by brick. Marcus found himself studying the way Eleanor's face animated when she spoke about a topic that excited her, the expressive gestures she made with her hands, the way her entire being seemed to light up when she laughed. There was a vitality in her, a fierce, unapologetic intelligence that he found utterly magnetic. Eleanor, in turn, was discovering that Marcus was unlike any man she had ever met. He made no attempt to impress her with a wealth or a status he didn't possess. He didn't ask invasive, probing questions about the mechanics of her disability or treat her as a symbol of triumph over adversity. He simply saw her, the whole, complete person. "Can I tell you something?" Eleanor said as they shared a dessert of tiramisu. "Of course. I almost cancelled tonight. 3 times, actually." "What changed your mind?" he asked, his curiosity genuine. "Our mutual friend Brenda," Eleanor said. "She told me you had the kindest, most gentle heart she'd ever known." In my world, gentleness is a rare commodity. I was curious to see what that actually looked like. Marcus set down his fork, and a flicker of vulnerability crossed his handsome features. "And what does it look like?" "It looks like someone who notices a ramp without being asked," she said softly. "It looks like someone who talks about his daughter with pure, unadulterated joy, even while discussing profound loss. It looks like someone who sees strength where others only see limitation. The air between them grew thick with unspoken possibilities." "Eleanor," Marcus began, his voice quiet but intense, "I need to be honest with you. This is the first date I've been on since Simone passed away. For a long time, I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready." "What changed?" she asked, echoing his earlier question. "Zoe," he said with a wry smile. "She's been on my case for months, telling me I need to start living for myself again." The smile faded slightly. "Tonight, she literally fixed my tie and told me that Mom would want me to be happy, that I deserved to find that for myself. She all but pushed me out the door." "Smart kid," Eleanor said again. "Too smart for her own good sometimes," he agreed. His expression grew serious. "But I want to be completely transparent. I'm not entirely sure I know how to do this anymore. Dating, I mean, especially with someone as remarkable as you." Eleanor felt her heart give a little skip. "Remarkable? You built an empire while you were rebuilding your own life. You're brilliant, you're beautiful, and you laugh like you mean it. You're completely and utterly out of my league." "Marcus Vance," Eleanor said, her voice firm and clear, cutting through his self-deprecation. "You are a man who spent 3 years as a devoted caregiver to the woman you loved. You raised an incredible daughter through unimaginable grief. You see people for who they truly are, not for the labels society attaches to them. Trust me," she said, her eyes locking with his. "You're in exactly the right league." When the check arrived, Marcus reached for it instinctively. Eleanor moved to intercept, a gesture born of habit and financial reality, but he caught her hand gently. The brief touch sent a jolt of unexpected electricity through them both. "May I?" he asked, his voice low. Eleanor started to protest. She likely earned more in a week than he did in a year. But there was something in his expression, a quiet dignity, a flicker of traditional pride, that stopped her. "This is important to you," she stated, rather than asked. Yes. She nodded slowly, relaxing her hand in his. Then thank you. As Marcus signed the receipt, Eleanor watched him, feeling a sensation she hadn't experienced in over a decade, the simple, uncomplicated pleasure of being taken care of. Not because she was incapable, but because someone else wanted to. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said as he tucked his wallet away. "Anything." "Doesn't it bother you?" she asked, finally voicing the question that always lingered in the background. The wheelchair. For most men, it's a blinking neon sign that spells out burden, complications, limitations. Marcus set down the pen and looked at her directly, his gaze steady and deep. "Can I show you something?" At her nod, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through his photo gallery until he found the image he was looking for. He turned the screen toward her. The picture showed a beautiful black woman in a wheelchair at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. Her hair was styled in elegant locks, and her eyes were bright and full of life. She was surrounded by bouquets of flowers and was wearing the biggest, most radiant smile Eleanor had ever seen. Despite an obvious frailty in her frame, she radiated pure, unadulterated joy. "This was Simone at Zoe's 8th grade graduation," Marcus said softly. "It was taken about 3 months before she passed. Look at her face. By then, she was in pain every single day. She was frustrated by her body's limitations, and she was scared of what was coming. But she was also fiercely alive, wickedly funny, and absolutely determined to squeeze every last drop of joy out of the time she had left." He put the phone away, his eyes finding hers again. The wheelchair was never the burden, Eleanor. The burden was the disease. The burden was watching the person I loved more than anything in the world struggle and knowing there was nothing I could do to fix it. But Simone taught me that fixing isn't always the point. Sometimes the point is just to be present, to show up, to see the person for who they are, not for what they can or can't do. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and for once, she didn't try to blink them away or hide them. "Most people see my success and assume I've overcome my disability," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I haven't overcome it. I've integrated it. It's part of the fabric of who I am now. And who you are," Marcus said with profound simplicity, "is extraordinary." As they prepared to leave, Eleanor navigated her chair toward the main door, only to find her path blocked. A large group of people waiting to be seated had formed an impassable wall of winter coats and loud conversation. Marcus saw her shoulders tense slightly, saw the familiar micro-calculation in her eyes as she debated whether to ask them to move or simply wait them out. Without a word of hesitation, Marcus stepped forward. "Excuse me, folks," he said, his voice warm but carrying a note of easy authority. "So sorry to interrupt. Could we just squeeze through here? Thank you so much." He gently created a path, his hand resting for a bare second on Eleanor's shoulder to guide her through the opening. It was done so smoothly, so naturally, that it was over before anyone had time to feel awkward. Outside, the February air of Philadelphia hit them with a sharp, cold slap. But Eleanor barely felt it. She turned to Marcus, her eyes bright with unshed emotion. "Do you know what struck me the most about tonight?" "What's that?" "You never once offered to help me unless I actually needed it," she said, the realization landing with stunning clarity. "You didn't assume I was incompetent, but you also didn't ignore a genuine obstacle. Do you have any idea how incredibly rare that is?" Marcus thought of Simone, of the thousands of tiny negotiations they had made together over the years, learning the delicate dance of when to offer a hand and when to step back. "I had a good teacher," he said simply. Eleanor pulled on her gloves, her movements precise. "Zoe is lucky to have you as a father." "I'm the lucky one," Marcus replied, his breath fogging in the cold air. "She saved me after Simone died. She gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning when I wasn't sure I wanted to." I'd love to meet her sometime, Eleanor said, the words carefully chosen, if you think she'd be comfortable with that. A smile spread across Marcus's face, so wide and bright it could have lit up the city block. She's been pushing me to start dating again for months. And once I tell her who I had dinner with tonight, she'll probably have a list of 100 questions prepared for you. I should warn you, though, she'll want to discuss cybersecurity protocols and ask for career advice. I like her already, Eleanor said with a laugh. Her driver pulled her adapted van to the curb, the familiar low hum of the wheelchair lift engaging as the side door slid open. As she prepared to transfer from her chair to the driver's seat, she looked up at Marcus. "I need to tell you something," she said, her tone serious. "I'm complicated. My life is busy, demanding. The wheelchair is just one piece of a very complex puzzle. Dating me wouldn't be easy." Marcus knelt, bringing himself down to her level. The gesture was so natural, so devoid of pity or condescension, that it took Eleanor's breath away. "Eleanor," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I spent 3 years watching the strongest woman I ever knew face impossible challenges with grace and humor. I learned that easy is overrated. Easy doesn't teach you anything. Easy doesn't show you what a person is truly made of." He met her gaze, his eyes full of a startling sincerity. "I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for real." Eleanor reached out, her gloved fingers touching his cheek. The leather was cold against his warm skin. "You're not at all what I expected, Marcus Vance." "Neither are you, Eleanor Croft," he replied softly. She laughed, that same genuine, uninhibited sound from earlier in the evening. "I have a board meeting at 7 tomorrow morning that I am completely unprepared for because I spent the entire day being nervous about tonight." "Was it worth it?" he asked. "Every single minute," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Then a playful smile touched her lips, though my shareholders might disagree. 2 weeks later, Eleanor found herself in Marcus's modest kitchen, watching him cook dinner while Zoe peppered her with questions about artificial intelligence and venture capital. The apartment was small but filled with a palpable warmth, the walls covered in family photos, Zoe's academic awards, and Marcus's history lesson plans scattered across nearly every available surface. "So, when you first launched the company," Zoe was saying, her laptop open on the table next to her plate, "were you concerned about the market volatility inherent in emerging tech sectors?" Eleanor nearly choked on her water. "Did you just ask me about market volatility?" "Zoe reads Forbes for fun," Marcus explained from the stove, setting down a steaming platter of pasta. "I've mostly given up trying to understand the inner workings of her brain." "I like to be informed about potential career paths," Zoe said with all the dignity a 16-year-old could muster. "And your company has one of the most competitive internship programs in the country." "Zoe Elizabeth Vance," Marcus warned, his tone light but firm. "We talked about this." "What?" "I'm just saying." Hypothetically, Eleanor looked from the father to the daughter, at the easy affection and gentle teasing that flowed between them. She saw the way Marcus's entire face softened when he looked at Zoe, the pride and love radiating from him. This, she realized, was what love looked like in practice. It wasn't about grand cinematic gestures. It was about the daily choices, the small kindnesses, the shared laughter over a simple weeknight dinner. "Actually," Eleanor said, turning her attention to Zoe, "we do have a mentorship program for high school students who show exceptional promise in STEM fields, if you're genuinely interested and not just being polite to your dad's new friend." Zoe's eyes went wide with disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Eleanor confirmed. "Send me your transcript and a personal statement about why you're interested in a tech career." "I'll see what I can do." Zoe launched herself from her chair and wrapped Amy in a spontaneous, enthusiastic hug. Over the girl's shoulder, Eleanor met Marcus's eyes. He was looking at her with such profound warmth and gratitude that she felt her own heart give a little flutter. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Later that evening, after Zoe had finally gone to her room, clutching a stack of programming textbooks Eleanor had brought for her, Marcus and Eleanor sat on the small, comfortable couch. Her wheelchair was positioned close enough that their knees almost touched. "She absolutely adores you," Marcus said, his voice soft in the quiet living room. "The feeling is mutual," Eleanor replied. "She's incredible, Marcus. She's brilliant and kind and so much like you." "She gets the brilliance from her mother," he said. "The kindness too, probably." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, absorbing the peaceful domesticity of the scene. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I've never wanted kids," she confessed. "My accident, my career, my whole lifestyle, it just never seemed compatible. But watching you two tonight—" She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the new, unfamiliar feeling that was stirring within her. "Tonight what?" he prompted gently. "Tonight," she said, finding the words. "I started to wonder what it would be like to be a part of something like this." A family Marcus reached for her hand, his long fingers lacing through hers. The contact was warm and solid. "Eleanor, I know this is going to sound crazy. We've only known each other for 2 weeks. It's not crazy," she whispered. His voice was quiet but certain. "Simone used to say that some people come into your life like seasons. They're meant to be temporary, to teach you something important and then move on. But others," he said, his thumb stroking the back of her hand, "others come into your life like gravity. They arrive and they change your entire orbit." "Which one am I?" she asked, her heart beating a little faster. Marcus lifted their joined hands to his lips and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her knuckles. "Your gravity, Eleanor Croft," he murmured against her skin. "You've been changing my orbit since the moment you rolled through that restaurant door." 3 months later, Eleanor arrived at Marcus's apartment to find Zoe in tears at the kitchen table, a series of opened envelopes spread out before her like a battlefield of defeated hopes. "MIT said no," she sniffled. "So did Stanford." "I'm never going to get into a good engineering program," Eleanor maneuvered her wheelchair next to the distraught teenager. "Zoe," she said gently, "can I tell you something about rejection?" Zoe nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Before I started Croft Innovations, I pitched my business plan to 47 different investors," Eleanor began. 46 of them said no. They told me I was too young, too inexperienced, too much of a risk. One of them actually told me to my face that disabled entrepreneurs were inspiration stories, not investment opportunities. Zoe's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I found investor number 47, Eleanor said with a small, hard smile. "And then I built a company so successful that the other 46 have spent years kicking themselves for their lack of vision." She met Zoe's gaze. "Sometimes, rejection isn't a judgment on your worth. It's a reflection of their vision or lack thereof. But what if I'm really not good enough?" Zoe whispered. "Zoe, you are one of the most brilliant young minds I've ever met, and I run in circles with some pretty brilliant minds," Eleanor said firmly. "These schools didn't reject you because you're not good enough. They rejected you because they have a limited number of spots and have to make impossibly tough choices." "That doesn't define your potential," Marcus appeared in the doorway, having overheard the end of their conversation. The look he gave Eleanor was one of pure, unadulterated love. "Besides," Eleanor continued, "some of the most innovative people I know went to state schools or started at community colleges. It's not about where you start, Zoe. It's about what you do with the opportunities you create for yourself." Zoe managed a watery smile. "Thanks, Eleanor." "Always, sweetheart." That night, after Zoe had gone to bed feeling considerably more hopeful about her future, Marcus and Eleanor sat in the small community garden behind his apartment building. It was late spring now, and the Philadelphia air had finally shed its winter chill. "You were amazing with her tonight," Marcus said, his voice full of awe. "She's going to be fine." Better than fine, Eleanor said with conviction. That girl is going to change the world. I meant what I said. You know what I said about gravity? Marcus asked, turning to look at her. There was a new intensity in his eyes, a seriousness that made her heart still. These past few months, being with you and Zoe, this is the happiest I've been since before Simone got sick. Maybe the happiest I've ever been. Period. He took a deep breath. Eleanor, I love you. I love your brilliant mind and your terrible jokes and the way you argue with the news anchors on TV. I love how you see Zoe, not just as my daughter who happens to be around, but as her own person, worthy of respect and investment. I love that you make me want to be a better man. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. I love you too, Marcus. So much it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because for the last 15 years, I've built walls around myself to protect me from exactly this, she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. From letting someone in who could hurt me if they left. Marcus reached for her hands, his grip firm and reassuring. Eleanor, look at me. She met his eyes and saw nothing but steady, unwavering love. I'm not going anywhere. Not because of work pressure, or social awkwardness, or accessibility challenges, or anything else. You're stuck with me. Promise, she whispered. I promise, he said. On one condition. What? In the soft glow of the security lights, Marcus slid off the park bench and onto one knee beside her wheelchair. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as he pulled a small, dark velvet box from his pocket. Marry me, Eleanor Croft, he said, his voice thick with emotion as he opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant solitaire that caught the faint light. Marry me, and let's build something beautiful together. Let's show Zoe what love looks like when it's brave and real and willing to take the biggest risks of all. Eleanor stared at the ring, then up at Marcus's face, at the hope and love and absolute certainty she saw there. Yes, she whispered, the single word a release of breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Then, louder, laughing through her tears, yes, yes, absolutely yes. As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, Eleanor thought about the improbable journey that had led them to this moment, the accident that had irrevocably altered her life's path. Simone's illness that had taught Marcus to see the world with a depth of empathy few ever achieve. Two people, shaped by loss and hardship, who had learned that love isn't about finding a perfect person. It's about showing up, seeing clearly, and choosing each other again and again. 6 months later, they were married at Il Polpo in the same corner of the restaurant where they'd had their first date. The ceremony was small, intimate, and perfect. Zoe served as maid of honor, her face streaked with happy tears as she snapped an endless stream of photos on her phone. Eleanor's parents, who had flown in from Boston, watched with wonder as their fiercely independent daughter glowed with a soft, radiant happiness they hadn't seen in years. During their vows, Marcus spoke of second chances and the quiet courage it takes to love again after loss. Eleanor spoke of finding a partner who saw every part of her, the brilliant CEO, the vulnerable woman, the person in the wheelchair, and loved all of it without reservation. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. But the moment that would be seared into the memory of everyone present was when Marcus, instead of the traditional kiss to seal their union, knelt down beside Eleanor's wheelchair. He took her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness so profound, so full of reverence and love, that the photographer nearly forgot to press the shutter. Later, at the reception, Zoe gave a toast that brought the house down. Eleanor, she said, raising her glass of sparkling cider. Thank you for showing my dad that his heart was big enough to hold more love. And Dad, thank you for showing Eleanor that she deserved someone who would love all of her exactly as she is. She beamed at them. You two are proof that the best love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about real people who choose to build something perfect together. As Marcus and Eleanor shared their first dance, with Eleanor maneuvering her chair in graceful circles as Marcus moved beside her, their steps perfectly synchronized, she caught sight of Zoe watching them from across the room, her smile as bright as the city lights. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, spinning her gently. "I'm thinking about gravity," Eleanor replied, her eyes shining. "And how sometimes the most beautiful thing about falling is that you land exactly where you were always supposed to be." Marcus smiled, a look of perfect understanding on his face. "Here's to gravity, then." "Here's to gravity," she echoed, "to second chances, and to a love that sees clearly." They continued to dance as the Philadelphia skyline glittered beyond the restaurant windows. Two souls who had learned that the most extraordinary love stories often begin not when we stop grieving what we've lost, but when we become brave enough to embrace what we might still find. Later that evening, the wheelchair sat beside their table, as much a natural part of the scene as any other chair. For the first time in a very long time for both of them, that felt exactly right. Eleanor had found her place in Marcus's life, not by filling a space that had been left empty, but by helping him build something entirely new. A love founded on understanding, acceptance, and the beautiful, terrifying courage to try again. As they prepared to leave for their honeymoon that night, Zoe hugged them both tightly. "Mom would have loved her," she whispered in Marcus's ear. Marcus looked at his wife, radiant and beautiful, and smiled. "I know she would have," he whispered back. "I think maybe she sent her to us." And somewhere in the vast, star-dusted sky above the city of brotherly love, perhaps she had.